There's a lot of talk out there right now about, I won't say like throw away your reporting, but stop spending so much time trying to figure out exactly where that last lead came from. Just admit to yourselves that you guys did a good job as a go-to-market team. You can track most of what's coming in and ignore the last 10 or 20% and just keep focusing on momentum and go. And it's something that, I'll be honest, not every team is comfortable doing. Thankfully, we were able to come to a good agreement, and my team spends a very, very small amount of time on reporting every single week, and it's a huge time save for them.
I'm Eric Fulweiler, and this is Scratch, bringing you marketing lessons from the leading brands and brains rewriting the rulebook from scratch for the world of today. Hey everyone, my guest today is Dan Slagen. He is the CMO of Tomorrow.io, a Series E scale-up that's actually the category creator of what they call weather intelligence, so data and analytics around predicting and understanding the weather for businesses and also for governments. You'll hear at the end of this is the first and only Scratch episode where I actually lost track of time. Dan has so much experience to bring to the table, so many perspectives, not just from the work that he's doing at Tomorrow.io, but he also teaches marketing AI for Section, Scott Galloway's kind of course and training offering that's out there. He wrote a book called Understanding Startup CEOs that is apparently a top 25 CEO book of all time. He has a lot of perspective and ideas on the role of the CMO, why so many of them aren't effective, and what it takes to be effective as a modern CMO, whether you're in a challenger business or an incumbent business. And a lot of the conversation where were so many learnings for me, to be honest, is really around how do you do more with less. At Tomorrow.io, they are a Series E scale up, but he basically has a seed stage marketing team and budget. They turn out 40 plus events a year with a 4-person team and a 6-figure budget. He has so much to share and really a playbook around how to do more with less, how to really make sure that you stretch your budget as far as possible and create outsized impact regardless of the scale or size of business that you're at. So I love this conversation. I'm going to be re-listening to this a few times over now that it's out. I know you're going to enjoy it too. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Dan Slagen of Tomorrow.io. Dan, thanks so much for joining me today. How are things in my hometown of Boston?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Amazing. Well, by the time this gets released, people will know that we now have an office in Boston. So at some point, we'll have to meet up in person. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, congrats. You guys are going to be in a beautiful part of the state, up on the North Shore, sort of near the coast.
Exactly. Well, Dan, let's get into it. Really appreciate you responding when I reached out. I think what you're doing at Tomorrow.io is fascinating. And then obviously the experience you have, the book that you wrote, just seemed like really a perspective that our audience needed to hear when it comes to not just challenger brands, but how to think about a career in marketing in the world of 2024 and beyond. So before we get into what you're up to at Tomorrow.io and some of your experience that's relevant for our audience, the icebreaker question that we ask every guest is, can you share one, or it can be a couple actually. We've had a couple of people that have shared a couple, that's for sure. But share a challenger brand that you're particularly passionate about right now and why.
Sure. One that comes to mind, I'd say is, I don't know if it's cliche or not. You do these shows all the time, but the Liquid Death, it's the beverage company. It's one that the reason it's top of mind for me is that my wife and I, we just had our third baby about 2 weeks ago. And I knew that we'd be going to the hospital for a couple nights. So I was putting together a bag of, goodies and treats and stuff from the grocery store. And she loves seltzers. And I figured, I'll get a couple cans. And I was going down the aisle and Liquid Death was the only one where you could just buy a couple individual cans. I was like, of course I've heard of that brand. I love what they're doing. So I bought a couple. So that's why it's top of mind. But specific to marketing, I've since read a bit more about their story and how they've approached the market and competing with monster brands that have been around forever. And instead of just sort of doing the normal marketing, they've really taken a different approach and they're incredibly creative. And the best part about their creative is that it pays off because their market share started to drive some real interest in across a bunch of different demographics. So for me, that's one that I'm watching pretty closely right now.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, that whole category is just incredible, even going all the way back to like vitamin water in the early days. But to think that there is still space for more challenger brands to come in with bottled water, sparkling water, deviations of different products and brands. And that is one that we've touched on before and gets talked about a lot in our CMO group on WhatsApp, because it is such a good example of there's no product differentiation at all. It's all brand and it's all marketing. And they've done a brilliant job and have continuously been able to deliver innovative things. It's not a one-trick pony. It's not even the same playbook, it doesn't seem like. They're just constantly innovating and constantly delivering on, really a brilliant modern challenger brand. So I think that is a great one. I do think I can't remember the stats, but reading some of the valuations that they've got right now, how is that possible at this point? But kudos to them. Let's see if they can keep it up. So Dan, can you please tell us a little bit about what you are up to at tomorrow.io for those of us that haven't heard about you yet?
Sure. Tomorrow.io, we're about a 6-year-old company, and we do something called weather intelligence. What that is we help major brands and governments around the world really understand how weather is going to impact their operations before it does, so that they can mitigate any risk. An example is Uber is a customer of ours, and we'll go to Uber and say, hey, in San Francisco, Monday from 9 to 12, you're going to have a 20% increase in demand. The reason might be because of rain, snow, sleet, ice, fog, but either way, you're going to have a 20% increase in demand. We'll tell Uber that anywhere from 2 to 14 days in advance, so they can make sure they have enough drivers on the platform ahead of time to avoid major ETAs and surge pricing and those types of things. And we do that across every single industry impacted by weather, which you can imagine: on-demand, sports and outdoors, energy, entertainment, tech. It's pretty much every single industry. We have about 25 to 30 different industries that we focus on, and that's on the enterprise side. And then on the government side, we help governments all around the world make sure that they're climate secure and they have the right systems in place to help with everything from making sure that the future of farming is going in a good track and they can adapt to climate, to making sure their population is safe from extreme weather.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously you gave me the overview in our prep call, but just with the refresh there, just thinking about how we come across these businesses where the market is really coming to them. And obviously, I think we all would wish that this wasn't the case, but it seems like with everything that is happening because of climate change, this is something that's going to unfortunately be more and more needed. So in a way, the demand is only going to increase for this and really is coming to you. Is this I guess kind of a two-part question. To the extent you can share, how are you actually doing this? And is this, would you call this category creation, or would you call this disruption of the incumbent way that businesses were trying to get this data or understand how weather would impact their business ahead of time?
It's a good question. The weather climate industry, I know there's been a lot of eyes on the industry in the last couple of years, but prior to that, there really weren't a lot of companies getting into the weather space that were getting big valuations and were growing big. It was, we might have one that focuses on wind or focuses on consumer or hobbyists or something like that. But it's incredibly difficult to actually build the end-to-end offering that we've needed to. We'll focus on enterprise for a second. In order to sell an enterprise package for weather, you need to do a couple things right. One, you need to actually forecast the weather in an accurate way. And so what we've done is we've actually built our own technology to drive much better and more accurate weather forecasting. For those that don't know, for the most part, the major weather companies for the last 20, 30, 40 years just took public weather data from governments, from NOAA, and they just repackage it and sell that. And it's fine, but the problem is that that's built for large regions and it's built for major emergencies. It's not supposed to be down to the road or down to the runway or tailored to an airplane pilot or tailored to a truck driver. And so what you have was relatively inaccurate weather being given to companies. So what we've done is we take public data, but we also include private data as well. And we've gone so far as to even build our own satellites. And we're in the process of launching a constellation of about 20 to 30 satellites up into space. We're drastically improving our ability to forecast weather, not only in the United States, but globally, where there's not a lot of great weather technology, as well as the oceans as well. So first and foremost, we have the world's most accurate weather data. We then have to take that data and run models against it, which is where our deep learning, machine learning, AI, whatever buzzword you want to throw in there, but it's all pretty real, takes that data and starts to put together different forecasts based on location, based on the industry, based on use case, sometimes tailored all the way down to the actual business or the government. And so we wouldn't exist without those two things. But the funny thing about the weather industry is that that's not even enough sometimes to sell to a major enterprise company. Just going and saying, hey, we have a forecast that's 20, 30, 40, maybe 50% more accurate. They're not always willing to rip out whatever current system they use, which sometimes is nothing, by the way. But it's still not always enough. So what we do is we take the forecast and then we translate it into predictive impact. And that's been a huge, huge part of us, is being able to, one, predict the impact of weather in advance, but then also be able to sell those three things together: the data, the models, and then the actual predictive impact for operations team to mitigate risk and drive efficiency. So doing all those things is incredibly difficult. It's quite costly. And it's so different than a normal, software or SaaS company. We can't just build software and run it. The software has to be powered by the weather data, which has to be right. The models have to be right. The insights have to be right. A lot needs to happen for Uber to get what looks like a very simple alert. Hey, Monday, 9 to 12 in San Francisco, 20% increase, make sure you have drivers. So there's a lot going on. We have an incredible team of kind of former NASA people, PhD level data scientists, that are just very passionate about driving this industry forward at kind of lightning speed. So in a nutshell, that's what we're up to.
That's super cool. And how did you get into this? Because, your background, I know you did a lot in ad tech, a lot in media. How did you end up and choose to go to a company like this as CMO?
I had just finished a fairly large role at a company where we had gone through $1 billion acquisition of Gannett Media. And to some degree, it almost felt like taking a little break. I'd been in the startup, very high growth industry for a while, and going into a much larger company. I think by the time we left, we were almost 20,000 people. Things are just very, very different. But coming out of that acquisition, on the other side of it, I sort of sat back and thought, what do I want to do next? And try to ask myself, do I have another startup run in me? And so I got down to, eventually I met the CEO of Tomorrow. The company was called ClimateCell at the time. And we had a really nice conversation. And then I also had a really nice conversation with a couple of the VC firms. If you remember 5 or 6 years ago, the thing was every VC firm wanted a CMO. And they wanted to have this big marketing capability and then branding and events and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of like, all right, do I want to do that, or do I want to take one more shot at a startup? And I think, what you just said about weather and climate, when I have the initial discussions with the team, you could just fast forward 10 years from now and really see where the market's going, but more importantly, I think where the world was going. And I just started having kids here, and now I have 3 kids. And it just seemed like if I'm going to, be spending time away from my family and focusing on something at this point in my career, this is something I'm very, very passionate about. And the vision of not only can we go work in weather and climate, but we actually have the capability and the technology to take over this market and be the leader. And so that's what I was sold on. The last thing that I think was really, really interesting was, in previous roles, I've had, the almost 100-person team, the $50 million a year budgets. And it's a fun challenge and a fun way to do marketing. This was the complete opposite. Building a weather and climate company the way we're doing it involves software, it involves tech, but it also involves hardware. So we're building our own satellites, we're launching them. There's a lot of money and capital that needs to be invested up front. So by nature, your go-to-market team is going to be much smaller than what an average SaaS company would be. And the marketing team and the capabilities and the budget are going to be a fraction of what I was used to in the past. And so I remember when the CEO was telling me this, he's kind of like, do you think you're up for this? This is going to be a tiny team. This is going to be barely any budget compared to what you're used to. And the ask that we're going to have of you is you need to make us a global brand. You need to compete with the biggest weather companies in the world. And you need to create this huge, huge movement. What do you think? And, he was probably playing to my personality a little bit when he was saying that, but it's something that I just got extremely excited about. And here we are 5 years later.
Super cool. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm a little bit jealous. Not that I'm not happy in my current job, but I will say, and I don't know if I've actually told this story on the podcast before, but, my last company where I was CMO, I was kind of ready to look for the next thing. And plan A was find another CMO role or senior marketer role somewhere. I'd always had a bit of an itch to scratch. I think at some point I was going to start my own thing, but it didn't necessarily need to be then. And when I took a step back and like literally asked myself, blank sheet of paper, what is the dream job? Where I got to is that it would be something doing what I know how to do, which is marketing, drive growth of the business, et cetera, but something in a sector that I really care about, which to me would have been climate tech. And so actually, maybe in an alternative universe, if I had stayed in Boston or something like that would have been, it sounds like an amazing opportunity is kind of what I'm getting at, both professionally for probably everybody listening, but also for me personally, given that kind of little moments when I tried to get into climate tech. And long story short, for those that don't know, I had a few conversations, but just didn't have much of a network in that industry. So didn't end up finding the right thing. And here I am 2.5 years later with a company. There you go.
Nice. If you ever want to switch seats for a couple of days, let me know. I'm sure my team would love to have someone else coming in for a couple of days.
Oh, there's definitely something to that.
I remember just because I'm in Boston, I think it was, I think the CEOs of, I want to say HubSpot and TripAdvisor or HubSpot and Kayak switched for a couple of days or something. It was a funny story, but yeah, they each went to each other's teams.
But there is something to, we just had a prep call earlier today with the CMO of eSports League. And it was fascinating because it's this guy who's actually a professional football player in Brazil, came up through the ranks of Nike, did all the football stuff for them, Nike Women, et cetera. And he was talking about how important it was for him to go into Nike Women after having done all the global kind of men's-led football or soccer stuff. Because he said that kind of resetting, going back to basics and recognizing the biases that he had built over time was so key, not just to getting it right for Nike Women, but also to every future CMO role that he's had, including coming into gaming, where he really had no experience. So I think perspective is everything. And there is something, maybe it's not swapping seats for a couple of days, but there is something to, you just don't know what you don't see anymore after 2 years, 4 years being in the same seat in the same place. So I guess that's kind of what, CMO groups and, different things, conferences and different things that you go to are valuable for. But there definitely is something to kind of like stepping out of the seat that you're in and maybe stepping into somebody else's seat just to kind of get a different perspective on things.
Yeah, especially even with some of the AI stuff as well. I mean, I know I was lazy during the COVID era when no one was going to events and traveling. I probably was not involved in as many online groups as I could have been or should have been. But as soon as sort of conferences and in-person started to come back, I remember the benefit of going back to conferences and just meeting people and talking to people and how many more ideas I got. And I felt so, I don't know if guilty is the right word, but I was like, I probably should have joined more online groups during COVID because this was so important. You just get stuck in such a silo. Yeah, I agree.
100%. All right, I'm going to think about that. I might be coming back to you with an idea of like the CMO swap platform or something, but we'll see. So, I definitely want to dig into what you're doing at Tomorrow because I think people will be shocked to hear the number of people and the budget that you have and what you've done to build this brand to date. But before we do that, so in our prep call, so we always ask, we want to understand what's your mental model, what's your playbook for marketing, et cetera. But one of the questions I love to ask is what's something that you're particularly passionate about in the marketing industry? And you straight up brought the fire on this answer. You knew exactly what you wanted to talk about. So I have to give you a little bit of space and credit to tell us about what's pissing you off about the conversations around the role of the CMO these days and why.
I will try and do this without sounding like an old crabby person. But one of the things I'm just so frustrated with right now is reading the headlines. I think Forbes was one of the first ones to put it out around the disappearing role of the CMO. And if the role's not disappearing, then the CMO is not reporting to the CEO anymore, or the CMO is not in the board meetings or anything like this. I mean, I remember when I was coming up through the ranks, it was pretty standard knowledge that, the CMO tenure was 18 months. And anyone that lasted more than that, something was going on, or they were really, really great in the role or something. And it's just been so frustrating to watch because there is a lot of great marketing going out there, but I don't know that it's a type of marketing that's being celebrated or being studied. And so I think the example we talked about was, I'm not going to mention the brand because there's no good in coming from this, but I was looking at a major brand last year. and the CMO sort of was coming forward to talk about the biggest accomplishment that the marketing team had of the year. And they basically said that the team changed the logo. And that was what an amazing accomplishment. We changed the logo. Marketing's amazing. We're the best department in the company. What a feat. And having gone through company changes, logo changes, and especially larger companies, it certainly is an operational challenge to make that happen. And there's a lot of respect that goes out to simply getting through a project like that. It's a hairy project. However, that's the type of marketing that gets celebrated more than anything else. And if you think about, what's a marketer's dream? Oh, I want to have a Super Bowl commercial. Well, after the Super Bowl, what does everyone go and look at? They go look at the USA Today ad meter. Which one got the most views? Which one got the whatever? There's this focus on brand and views and top line metrics, which sometimes is good. Oftentimes there's a lot of value, but it doesn't mean that there was impact on revenue or impact on sales. And so what we've had is this type of mindset for years and years and years, where you have young marketers coming out of college or getting into the space, and they see their bosses, their CMOs, talk about, oh, we had all these views, we did this branding thing, we changed the logo, and they think that that's the most important part of marketing. And then they go on to their first director job, VP job, CMO job, and what's the first thing they want to do? I want to change the website, I want to change the logo. And then that doesn't work, and things don't work out so well. And we've had this horrible cycle going on where I don't think that the focus is where it needs to be. So what I'd love to see much more of is every marketing team stand up at the end of the year and say, we impacted sales by X% this year. Now, the way we did it might have been we changed the logo, or we made a website change, or we launched a new campaign, or whatever it might be. But you have to lead with the impact you had on revenue and sales and not anything else. And that's the reason why we're not reporting into the CEOs as much, or we're not in the board meetings, because frankly, who cares? And it's very easy as a CMO to sit in, your monthly management or even your weekly management call and just talk about good numbers. There seems to be this pressure on marketing to come every week with good news. And when that's the mindset, you're going to start to look at any number that improved in the last 7 days. Oh, we got more website traffic. Oh, we got more likes to this. Oh, this video did well. Versus every week coming to with what your major challenges are specifically to drive new sales, to drive new revenue, to impact the bottom line. And I see so many marketers shying away from that because they're worried about, their job. And so instead, if they can come in every week, kind of keep things cheery, keep things positive, that's how they approach the role. But it's something where I'm really worried about the role, because I think when I read those articles from places like Forbes, it makes sense. Like, I don't agree that the CMO role should be disappearing. I don't agree that we shouldn't be reporting to the CEO or that we shouldn't be in board meetings, but I can start to understand why. And so it's a very scary moment, I think, for the entire industry within marketing, and time for a change.
Yeah. So I totally agree. I do have a additional perspective that I'll put on the table, but I totally agree. And I think for me, the way that I got into this industry, which is really by accident, like I was working in nonprofit, I was kind of frustrated, I ended up taking a job at Forbes actually to figure out, and I'm using air quotes for those listening, figure out this social media thing for them, sign them up on Twitter. What does it mean for journalists? It was all about like the blogger network at that time. So like just kind of learned it. Right. And then ended up meeting a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, who was big in social media at the time. He was starting an agency, and away we go. And now 15 years later, apparently this is what I do. But the thing that I love about what I do is figuring out how to change perception and behavior to build businesses. I am not I'm never taken a marketing class. For better or for worse, I think there's pros and cons to that, right? But I think that one of the pros is that I have never been about, and actually am violently against, what I call marketing for the sake of marketing, which I think is a big part of the industry. People who get so excited about that logo change, that campaign. I think there's a lot of brands, Liquid Death, probably one of the exceptions, where I feel like there are a lot of marketers that love the marketing, but also it's clearly driving business results. I think you see a lot of brands where a lot of marketers love the campaigns and nobody talks about whether or not the business is actually growing. That's the stuff that I really push against. And I think particularly for people that come up through the agency side, like me, I had the benefit of being more interested in and shifting to more of a commercial track, account management, but then pretty quickly like MD, GM, commercial oriented roles, which I think helped with me learning that side of it. But I think for a lot of other people, especially if you're on the agency side, it can be so easy to just focus on marketing for the sake of marketing and not marketing for the sake of business results. That said, and here's my additional perspective that I'd love your thoughts on, not all marketing can or should be directly tied to a short-term ROI. I guess, first of all, agree or disagree? And then second of all, how does that factor into your perspective? Because I totally agree that we should be working backwards from here's the accomplishment of the business result that marketing delivered, because marketing is a means to an end of growing the business, but not all of those should be sales or revenue, at least not in the short term. But what do you think?
Definitely agree. I can give the example that I did here at Tomorrow's how we thought about the market. So when I was interviewing here, what we tried to look at on paper was what is kind of the 1 year, the 3 year, and the 5 year plan of where we want to be, and what are the things that we need to do now in order to impact where we want to be 12 months from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And then across that, which of the things are branding, which of the things are more direct response, which of the things are product related, and what should we do and when? And so when we've thought about that, that's helped us at least justify, all right, we're doing something that's strictly a branding initiative. The reason that we're doing it right now is because we think it will help us sell 3 years from now when the market has evolved a bit, our product has gotten a little bit more kind of valuable, and we've built a bigger name for ourselves. And so that's what we've done. We kind of map it out and we time bound things as to when we expect them to have an impact, but we at least try and quantify what the impact can be as well. So that's how we think about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not everything should be tied to a short-term commercial ROI, but I think you do need to find a way to measure what you're doing against some type of progress that you want to see. And I really like that framework of kind of splitting it up into different objectives for different marketing activities and then putting the KPIs against those.
To that point as well, I think if you have a real justification as to why you're doing things as well, I just always think in my mind, if we're doing something in marketing that I'm going to share with the executive team, I also think to myself, would I share this at a board meeting? I'm sitting in a board meeting. They're talking about specifically where's the company going, what's working with the technology, what's going on with revenue, what's going on with profitability, and then they come to marketing. And there can be such a big drop in what you're talking about or the value that you're bringing comparatively to some of the other pillars of the business. You really, really need to make sure that the things that you're bringing up, even if they're, brand related or they're not, to your point, short-term revenue related, that there's real strategic value to it. And the only reason I say that is because obviously there's a ton of value to marketing. But in order for marketing to live where we all want it to live, which is at the top, at the board level with the CEO, you really, really need to make sure that you're not just doing things, that you're driving value and you understand how and when you're going to be driving value with the things you're doing. And to your point, we can't have things that are short-term revenue focused, but we also can't have things that are kind of short-term, like vision focused as well. Like everything does need to bake into a plan.
Totally agree. And I know we're going to touch on this more when we get to, the chapter here talking about the book you wrote, Understanding Startup CEOs. But I really do think that understanding being able to speak the language of the CEO, the language of the board, is such a core skill that I think is underdeveloped in a lot of the marketing industry. And I'd love to ask kind of for any specific advice you have for people listening who want to be on a track to CMO. We're like, yeah, totally agree. What do I do? And one thing that I'll draw out from what you said, and then I'll let you answer, is I think it's a really interesting prompt to just be like, as you're working through what you do, and certainly as you're working through a report or an announcement or something like that, imagine that you had to present it to the board. Don't imagine that you had to present it to your marketing team or maybe even, the product team. Like, think about it from the board level down. I think that's a great place to kind of pin your perspective. And that will also help you feel out maybe where you need to educate yourself a little bit, or like, how would the board talk about this topic? What do I need to understand in order to communicate it effectively if it were at a board meeting? But I'd love to hear from you, like, for people listening, what are practical things that they can do differently to go get this experience or kind of change the shape of their role within their organizations?
I think as far as understanding certain more the financial metrics and that kind of stuff, one is spending a lot more time with your finance team. Really at any level, it doesn't matter. I mean, I remember being a very, very junior marketer where I was just managing Google AdWords campaigns for a couple different clients. And I would always go back to finance at the end of the month and we'd look at how much we spent and everything. And I remember the finance team would have so many, this is, 15 years ago before Google is what it is now. But the finance team would say stuff like, like I see Google's charging us, $150,000 for pay-per-click this month. Well, how do we know? We need them to prove it before we're not just going to pay this bill. And I remember being like, you guys not believe Google? Like, do you not believe the invoice? How do you want me to justify? There's no way to justify this invoice. This is what they said. We need to pay it. But I remember having like literal fights with kind of more older school finance people that would just not believe the invoice. And from there, it would kind of go into the next conversation. But ever since then, I've always had an interest in working more with the finance department. And it's always helped. It's gone from just, all right, I need finance to help me do what I want as a marketer, to finance, tell me about your role a little bit. What are you guys reporting on at the end of the month or the end of the quarter or the end of the year? And as I've grown up in my career, yes, I partner very, very closely with a bunch of the C-levels, but the CFO is the one that I partner with a lot. And I really want to make sure that I'm in their shoes as well. I understand the metrics and their goals that they need to present to the board as well. And I make sure that marketing is within line and within goals that they want to be presenting. But that's been a really important part as well, just understanding all the things you guys do in finance. What are the things you're going to be putting in front of our CEO and the board as well? And they've been so gracious to teach myself and my team as well. But the last thing I'll say is that they really love it, because most people don't want to go to finance. Most people do not excel when it comes to budget management. They're not thinking ahead and they're not working hand in hand with finance. And they usually cause more problems than not for the finance team. So for any marketer out there, know that your finance team is probably dying to work with you to help better understand how you think. They'd love to share how they think. And there's so much that you guys can share in terms of knowledge back and forth.
Hey everyone, just wanted to take a quick break because we've actually heard from many of you that you want to get a better understanding of what it is that we actually do as a business. You know us through this podcast, all the content that we put out, the events that we put on, the community that we have, the media company side of what we're up to here at Rival. But actually the core business, just to kind of fill you all in, is we're a full service marketing agency at this point. Obviously, we specialize in challenger brands. And what that means is that we work with either startups to help them scale and get to the next level, or we work with a lot of incumbents like Reebok, Unilever, JP Morgan to help them innovate or launch something new within the marketing function. We typically work across four main areas of the marketing department: brand and product positioning, creative ideation and production, paid media planning and buying, and customer data and marketing technology. We're also building some tech of our own, as you would have seen with Curo and also Enodo. So that's it. Just wanted to fill you all in since you've asked for it. And if you're interested in hearing more about what we're up to, please get in touch. But with that, I'll let you get back to the show. I love it. It's so practical. I mean, I think one of the big shifts in my career path was taking the role with Vayner to come to London. And it was an MD role. It was like build a business in EMEA from scratch. But once we got to the point where we kind of had finance support, I was like, all right, this is my right hand. And shout out to Fitz if he's listening. But the FD at Vayner there, he spent many, many hours with me, kind of just teaching me everything, weekly meeting, pinging him all the time, stopping by his desk, etc. So I really think that just shifting or expanding some of your focus and center of gravity as a marketer towards finance, a little bit of that is going to go a long way. So Dan, let's shift gears and talk a little bit more about what you're up to at Tomorrow IO. And I think the place I'd start with this as a bit of a preamble or jumping off point is like more with less. That is like the theme, the rallying cry, the frustration of almost every marketer in the world of 2024. Most people are really struggling with that. It seems like you are not. So you're a Series A business. What you told me on the prep call really shocked me, but you can let me know if this is still true. Your marketing team is 4 people and a 6-figure budget for a Series E business that's doing, well, I'll let you tell us, 40 events. You've coined this term, weather intelligence. You've really put Tomorrow IO on the map. So I guess, how are you doing that is really the question. But to break that down and make it more specific, can you give us an overview of what the marketing function looks like, and maybe some of your principles or practices that are allowing you to do so much more with so much less?
Yeah. Numbers are right. We are a 4-person team. We have a 6-figure budget. And one thing I'll say is we sort of knew this was the game we were playing. So, for some teams where you've built up and up and up and you have 100 plus people or 500 people and you get huge budgets and now you're getting a huge slash and you're getting cut, that there's never been a surprise for us. I've sort of just known that this team was always going to be relatively small and that our budgets would always be relatively small as well. So everything we've done, we've kind of planned around that. But to give people just context, if you go back maybe even 5 years ago for a normal software company of our size, being reasonable and being conservative, our team on average would be, we'd probably be something like a 35 to 50 person company. And 30 to 50 person marketing team. And we'd probably have at least $15-20 million budget per year would be, that's on the conservative side. And so we're operating, so let's call it 50 people, $20 million a year. We're operating with 4 people, 6 figures. So even before you get into the cuts and the AI efficiencies, all that stuff, that's the difference in what our team is doing. But again, we had a bit of a head start in sort of knowing how to think about these systems 4 or 5 years ago. And I think we've been, to some degree, our team's been a bit lucky that the market has actually shifted towards the way we've always thought and in our mindset. So there's been a lot of thought and skill that's gone into it, but we've also been a bit lucky in terms of timing. I can't ignore that. But we first and foremost thought to ourselves, all right, what's it going to take to play in this market? And how can we simplify what marketing does more than anything else? So first, we just cut the team into 3 different categories. We have branding efforts, we have lead gen efforts, and we have product marketing efforts. And we looked at each one and we said, all right, where do we want to be, a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And the first thing we said was we do want to create a major, major brand because the companies we're competing with are, tens of millions, if not close to $100 million marketing budget every year. They have their own TV stations. They're sponsoring the biggest events in the world. They're on every television station or website that you see out there. And we need to create a real differentiator. The thing I talked about earlier around this, weather forecasting and the technology and translating a forecast to predictive insights, that was something where we felt like there was real opportunity. I mean, you and I pretty much grew up our whole lives. I'm assuming, seeing the weather be wrong most of the time, or even when it was right, not super, super helpful. Like, great, it's going to be 45 degrees out and 15-mile-an-hour winds tomorrow. What does that mean? So am I in a sweatshirt? Am I in a heavy sweatshirt? Is that a coat? Is it pay? I didn't even know. And then trying to translate that to a business. What if you're running a railroad with thousands of miles of tracks with hundreds of different rail cars going 24/7? What's the impact of weather? What should I do? Should I stop the train? Should I go? Am I going to derail? What's going to happen? And so we felt like there was a real opportunity there. And what we felt like was people lacked this moment of intelligence. So they had a weather forecast, but we thought, what if we created our own brand around weather intelligence? And so we kind of we knew we would improve the accuracy a lot, but we sort of put that off to the side for a little bit and just said, what if we create this category of weather intelligence? And we say, it's one thing if you're running a railroad company to get a forecast of 15, mile-an-hour wind and 20 degrees tomorrow. It's another thing to get a forecast of stop the trains at mile marker 26 Monday at 9 to avoid derailment. Completely different. And when we would go test that with our existing customers or our prospects, they'd all get it instantly. And so we felt like, all right, this is the thing that we're going to go push up the hill. And since we've done that, a ton of content around it. We've been awarded by, the Foresters and the Gardeners of the world as sort of the category leader. They actually put out their own reports saying weather intelligence is real. It's a thing. They made us the leader by quite a bit against all the other weather and climate companies in the space. We've created our own annual conference around weather intelligence. The first year we did it, I think we had something like 500 or 600 people show up. Then it was 1,200, then 2,500, then 5,000. And we've just grown that tremendously. We've had speakers from NASA, from the White House, from the NHL, from JetBlue, from the NFL, from Fox Sports. We had amazing people come and talk and really share for the first time how weather impacts our operations and why having a system in place has been different. So it's been actually really interesting content that's never been out there before. So brand was the first thing that we really put into place. And that has been incredibly helpful, is working everything from the brand on down. We then took that story and we took it to the media. And I've always been a big fan of the media. Help tell your story through the biggest audiences in the world where you have very easy access. And so, for us, building a huge social media following, again, with a 4-person team and a 6-person budget, I'm not going to be able to do everything. So I remember my team looking at me a little bit when I just said, we're going to ignore Facebook. We're going to, this before they were called Meta. We're going to ignore Twitter. We're going to ignore whatever else. We are going to do LinkedIn, and that's going to be great. And we're on a good path there. But it was more like, how do we get on CNN? How do we get on CNBC? How do we get on NBC? And so we worked very hard to go tell that story. And every single time there'd be a major weather event or we'd have a major opportunity at the company, we would go to the market and we were very aggressive with media. And since then, we're at the point now where there's, it's like I have to really struggle to think of where we haven't been featured. Like we have been on CNBC, NBC, Forbes, CNN, we've been on TV, online, we've been absolutely everywhere. And that's helped amplify our story so much. And for anyone that says PR doesn't drive leads, it absolutely does. I remember we had a feature in CNBC a couple years ago. It was like Friday at 4:00. And I was thinking to myself, of course we got our PR and CNBC Friday at 4:00. The worst possible time. We were flooded with hundreds of demo requests over the weekend. Our sales reps got online that weekend and they were very nice about it. But I had more leads just from that one article than almost any other campaign we've done. So on the brand side, we've done a lot around the storytelling, the go-to-market, and playing where we could punch above our weight. I can get into the other areas, but just stop for a second there. Any questions on the brand side?
I think just maybe one quick reaction, then I have one question, but I'll let you kind of share the other aspects of it. Just one reaction from me is I think that anecdote that you told about deciding not to do Facebook and Twitter, I think oftentimes when we're talking about marketing strategy or playbooks or mental models or whatever, we're so focused on what you do. But actually, as they say, strategy is the art of the sacrifice and all that. You have to not do certain things if you want to do other things well. So it sounds super obvious, but kind of in this world of do more with less, well, we're all focused on, well, what do I start doing? What am I not doing that I need to do? Actually, you also need to look at what do you stop doing or what do you choose not to do? Because that's an equal part of the equation of being able to do more with less. So just that reaction from me, but would love to hear about the rest of it as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, the brand has been a huge part of our story. The last part, we also changed the name of the company. When I joined, we were called Climacell, and we felt like we have to figure out a nice household name. We did the whole change in-house. I probably looked at 10,000 different names of companies where we eventually found tomorrow.io, ended up buying it, and it's been a really nice change for us since. But moving on from brand, which is something that really, the whole company has benefited from. On the lead gen side, and we kind of have two different areas. We have enterprise and we have government. But the thing that has helped the most has just been sitting down with our head of sales since day one and getting it all out on the table immediately. And there's just nothing that goes unsaid, no elephant in the room. You just get it all out ASAP. And so we had that, 4 years ago. And it was at some points a contentious discussion, and maybe it was an argument in some area. But we knew that we had to leave that meeting 100% on the same page. We needed to leave knowing what we were both comfortable with, what we were not comfortable with, and where we were going to place our bets. Because just like I have a smaller marketing team than most, that person also had a smaller sales team than most compared to their industry benchmarks and comparisons. And so, being on the same page with your head of sales has been incredibly important. To your point, there's things that we don't choose to focus on that I know other companies spend hours and hours on every single week. We just don't care about them because we don't have time to care. And I know that the added value that would be gained from those hours spent is not worth it to us and would probably hurt our lead generation and our pipeline creation. So for instance, take reporting as an example. There's a lot of talk out there right now about, I won't say throw away your reporting, but stop spending so much time trying to figure out exactly where that last lead came from. Just admit to yourselves that you guys did a good job as a go-to-market team. You can track most of what's coming in and ignore the last 10 or 20% and just keep focusing on momentum and go. And as something that I'll be honest, not every team is comfortable doing. Thankfully, we were able to come to a good agreement, and my team spends a very, very small amount of time on reporting every single week, and it's a huge time save for them. That said, I'm still able to put the right metrics in front of our management team and the board so that people feel comfortable where we are spending our money, but also the time of our marketers. So I'd say the biggest thing on lead gen is just really making sure you 100% understand the target market, what a good lead is, making sure that you and the salesperson are 100% aligned, and then going to market as often as you can. So to your point earlier, yes, we do 40 events per year all around the world. One week we'll be in Fiji. We're in Dubai in December. I think we're in Orlando this week. Like, we're all over the place all the time. We've just built a system where we're incredibly efficient at it. We have both help from marketing and the sales team, and we're able to execute it at a much more efficient clip than most teams are. I'd say the way we're able to do all of this, by the way, is AI is a huge part of our strategy. What we do is we look at every single thing we do on marketing and we start to bucket it out. Well, what are the details of something that needs to happen from start to finish? So if we're going to go to an event, we need to do 10 different things for that event to happen. Across those 10 things, where can we use AI and where can we use a human? And if we start to plug in AI into even 30% of it or 40% of it, great, that's time saved. We have a system in place and then we go. We do that same exercise for creating a blog article or a press release or a website update or doing a conference. Every single thing we do, we start with AI now, and we have for probably 2 years now, and just asking ourselves, where can we start to save time? So that's been a huge, huge part. Not only can we get more time from AI, but we can also punch well above our weight. The other thing with lead gen is that I think, we've taken really big swings creatively, and not all of them have worked, but we know that consistently going forward with creative campaigns and trying to be loud and drive value has worked. And this is something that I credit my CEO a lot with, because he's given me the trust in my role and myself that I haven't always had as a CMO or a head of marketing at a company. And it's something that a lot of marketers don't have. I know we'll talk about the book later, but the reason I wrote that book is because someone was afraid that they were going to lose their job. And so my CEO and I and my management team and I, we have so much trust that I know not all of our campaigns will work, but I know that we're going to learn from them and we have a good hit rate. And, my job is not going to be at jeopardy because we had one miss. Again, it's something that not every marketer has that ability or comfort with. So it's something that I'll just credit my CEO and management team with quite a bit.
So just pulling out a couple things from that, because I think it's all I'm definitely going to go back and re-listen to this a couple times because I'm certainly learning. I think one thing that popped out to me is like how you're talking about taking the creative swing. So we've done, 85 or so episodes of Scratch. So have had really, I would do this for fun. It just happens to be work as well, but really the pleasure of kind of speaking to CMOs from all different stages, all different categories, all different really walks of marketing life. And the biggest pattern that I see is that the ones that are successful are taking swings. They are testing, they are iterating, whether that's a formal framework type thing, like a 70-20-10, or they're just constantly kind of pushing the innovation agenda of we got to do more stuff. We got to try that. We got to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. And actually, we use the American baseball metaphor of like home run, singles, stuff like that. And it always stuck with me because it doesn't really make sense because you can win baseball games by hitting singles. And actually a lot of teams do. And you could argue that's actually the better way to do it. But anyway, it's more like a home run derby in many ways, particularly as a challenger, right? Like you either need to hit the home run or you're not going to get noticed at all. And so you need to take those swings that might not get over the fence. But if you don't try with the home run swing, you're never going to get the home runs that you actually need. So I think that was one for me. And just going back to some of the reflections that I've had interviewing all these CMOs, I think the other one is, obviously AI, this thing that everybody's talking about, top of mind. I see so many marketers, particularly in big businesses, just kind of struggling of where to start. And I loved what you said of just lay out what you need to do and ask yourself, what can I do with a human and what can I do with AI? And it might not be as simple, particularly if you're in like a big bank, to go get AI to do those things, but at least you're asking the question and understanding where it might fit in. Quick question for you. Those 40 plus events, you're doing all of that in the 6-figure budget, or does that come from a different P&L, part of the P&L?
Nope. That's all coming from a 6-figure budget. Yeah. I mean, for us, we look at him, of those 40 events, let's say 4 of them are pillar events. And the other we are doing at the absolute cheapest possible cost in all walks of life. One thing though that one advantage of building the brand is that we don't pay to speak anymore. 2 years ago, we were getting, oh, come speak at this conference, $25,000 a keynote. Now it's, hey, will you guys come speak at our conference? So we've been fortunate, but we also tried to do that. I'm not going to say we knew that would happen in building the brand, but it was a hope that shift would happen. Saves us a lot of money. Everything from just, getting your flights and hotels comped and that kind of stuff.
Actually, my last company where I was CMO, it got to the point where actually they were paying us, not every conference, but a lot of the conferences we could ask for a speaker fee because we were so famous from all the content that we did and how we had built the brands. That's amazing that you're doing all those events because that can be such a suck and a drain on budget. And the other thing I'll pull out from what you said is I'm a big believer of not getting stuck in the middle, either doing the big pillar, let's blow everybody else out of the water, or shoestring everything. Don't do anything halfway. So, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit to make a point, but I love that that approach of like, we're going to do the big things and we're going to do tiny shoestring things, but not going to do anything in the middle. I guess the only question, just realized we are really running low on time. The quick question I wanted to ask you is, it seems like everything is going really well. Why not do more? Is it just purely a budget constraint? I know you mentioned it's like a big overhead cost of R&D, building these satellites and putting them into space. Is that it? Or is there another reason that you haven't kind of doubled down and put more fuel on the marketing fire?
It's a good question. For us, the way that we're growing our company is very strategic. It's been a wild challenge. I mean, we talked about building our satellites for the last 4 years almost. And it's kind of wild to tell a marketing story about futures and almost selling on futures to some degree, given our software does a lot of really great stuff, but we've also had this really cool thing of, hey, we're launching, 20, 30 satellites up into space. And so we try and time bound the company as to, okay, where do we want the company to be in terms of technology, product, brand, financial at this point, and that point. And so through each phase, marketing has just sort of adapted and played the role that it needed to play across each moment within the company. So I think for now, we've always been a more conservative company. And to some degree, I mean, the department to some degree is a bit of a victim of its own success. I mean, I remember, I tell this story as well. Last year, marketing had a headcount that we were starting to interview for. And I'm sitting in our management meeting and I'm hearing our head of sales talk about one of their struggles. And at the end of the meeting, I sort of called him and I said, hey, I'm just going to give you my head count. Like, I can't justify my head count right now based on what you just said. And that was one of the reasons why I went back to the marketing team. I told them, hey guys, I gave back the head count. Here's why. We need to come up with a much better role if I'm going to go back to the CEO and the management team and ask for another head count. I'll do it, but this is why I gave it back. And so the team came back, and that was actually a huge AI moment for us. Was we hired, we actually got headlines in Axios for it. I don't know if this is true, but the headline was Tomorrow.io hires the world's first AI marketer. But the job description literally was AI marketer. And we put down all the things we needed that person to do. And it was that kind of thinking where we went back and said, yeah, we gave back the headcount. That's the best thing for the company. And here's how we can actually be a better department for everyone. And so just keeping that in mind, it's really hard. I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't have an ego. And some days it's very hard to wake up with a 4-person team. But I'm constantly fighting that and trying to keep in mind what is best for the company. And the cool thing is I just need to look at our growth in the last 4 years. And the number of companies that have done what we've been able to do, I can count them on, 2 hands, given what's been going on in the world and the market. So yeah, every marketer has an ego. It's a struggle, but every day we kind of know this is the right path for us.
Well, it's super impressive what you've done. So this has not happened before on Scratch that I have lost track of time, but it has happened. So I know we're up on time. I can go a minute or two over. I'll just shoot a note to my next meeting, but I want to make sure that we talk quickly about the book. So can you give us a quick overview of the book you wrote, why you wrote it, and what are the key lessons for marketers from what's in there?
Sure. Real quick, the book is called Understanding Startup CEOs. So over the course of my career, I've probably worked with hundreds of startup CEOs, and I've gotten to know them extremely well and founders and what they expect. And what I found when I wrote the book was there were so many CMOs that were either in the role for the first time or the first couple times, and they were just so nervous all the time because they didn't know what was in the head of their CEO or founders. And the book was really meant to illuminate for them, here's all the things that your founder or CEO is thinking at all times. And you just need to use this book as a guide. Once a month, once a quarter, just look through it, see which things you're falling behind on, and make sure that you're constantly putting those things in place. I wrote it because someone reached out to me and said, hey, I think I'm getting fired this week. I honestly can't tell week to week what they're thinking. They didn't get fired that week, but it's like their head was just a complete mess. And I just wrote the book pretty much for advice for that one person. And it kind of spiraled into what it is now. But the last thing I'll say is it's really to help every CMO and every person have the mindset of a CEO, both for your department and for your company.
I love it. And I know it was ranked a top 25 CEO book by bookauthority.org. So everyone listening, you should definitely go check it out. Dan, I'm really sorry we didn't get a chance to do the outro quickfire questions, but like I said, sign of a good conversation if the host loses track of time. But the last thing I will ask you, if people want to connect, if they want to check out the book, follow your journey at Tomorrow.io, what's the best place to reach you?
Just find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Dan, thanks so much for the time.
All right. Thank you.
Scratch is a production of Rival. We are a marketing innovation consultancy that helps businesses develop strategies and capabilities to grow faster. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with me, email me at eric@wearerival.com or find me on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and please do leave us a review. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.